Good morning, good morning, good morning. How is everyone feeling? I understand, and thank you for getting up and joining us early this morning in the final day of our 2024 Housing Policy Forum. Please repeat after me. It's a new day.
It's a new day.
That sounded good. One more time. It's a new day.
It's a new day.
That's right. And in this new day, and with this network of each and every one of you, of advocates, both in this room right now and those joining us virtually, how timely of it is that this morning we are hosting our panel on Our Homes, Our Votes, and Building the Political Will for Housing Justice in the 2024 elections. And so echoing what Diane shared yesterday about how crucially important our collective work is in closing the voter registration gap, including making sure that our emerging generations, our youth, feel inspired and empowered in knowing that their vote makes a difference, and how important it is that they exercise their right to vote. And that starts right here in this room. And with the partnership of each of you, just know the NLIHC is also very committed to building that political will and expanding this work while also supporting all of your efforts. Today's panel is going to be moderated by NLIHC's Courtney Cooperman and joined by Dr. Bambi of Georgia ACT, Lauren Lagutsky with POA Communities, and Mary McGovern with the Minneapolis High Rise Representative Council. But before our panelists take the stage, just a couple of housekeeping things. We do ask that, and please tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend. When you are making your way through all of the event spaces today, please do wear your credentials at all times. Not only does that help with networking and making connections, it helps our staff as well. Another thing, if you have not already visited our digital hub, please do so, and that will give you support in either downloading or accessing using the app and all of its offerings. A big part of using the app, bless you, a big part of using the app is for our Q&As in each and every plenary session. And so at the top of every plenary session, Q&A is going to open up, and it's going to work in a couple of different ways. You can enter your questions via the app. We'll also have questions that are going to be submitted by our virtual attendees, or you can visit our NLIHC team in the back of the room and submit a written-in question. And wave in the back, NLIHC team, so you know where they are. And so when you do that, by the time we arrive to each Q&A, we are going to make sure that we address and get to as many questions as we can, but it's really important that through each plenary session, you guys are using those resources to get those questions to us. And so with that, we are, again, focusing on building the political will for this election, and we're going to do just that. And so please join me in welcoming our panelists.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2. I'm Courtney Cooperman. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the project manager for NLIHC's Our Homes, Our Votes campaign. Our Homes, Our Votes is our nonpartisan initiative to boost voter turnout among low-income renters and to elevate housing as an election issue. As Diane highlighted in her remarks yesterday afternoon, renters are significantly less likely to vote than homeowners, and there are even greater voter turnout disparities between the lowest income and the highest income people. In the 2022 midterm elections, just 37% of renters voted, compared to 58% of homeowners. Only 33% of the lowest income people voted, compared to 67% of the highest income people. These disparities are not a coincidence. They're the product of policies that make it harder for renters and low-income people to vote, with a disproportionate impact on voters of color. But these disparities are also not inevitable. We know that housing advocates, nonprofits, housing providers, and tenant leaders are trusted messengers that have the power to help community members overcome these obstacles and show up at the ballot box. Research from Nonprofit Vote found that in the 2020 elections, low-income voters who were engaged by nonprofits had a turnout rate 7 percentage points higher than comparable low-income voters who were not engaged by nonprofits. So there's no question that this nonpartisan voter engagement works. But we know that our field is incredibly busy doing all of the day in, day out work of achieving housing justice. And voter engagement might feel like just one too many additional things to add to your plates. That's why NLIHC leads the Our Homes, Our Votes campaign. Our goal is to provide the tools and resources that make it possible for our network to register, educate, and mobilize voters in their communities without ever needing to reinvent the wheel. Our campaign tools and resources include our bi-weekly webinar series that will relaunch for the year in mid-April, our online resource library at ourhomes-ourvotes.org, our network of affiliates, which are nonpartisan organizations that are formally identified with the campaign and committed to carrying out its goals, which receive support such as an exclusive listserv and events and participation in office hours to learn more from our team. And we convene the Housing Providers Council, which is a group of affordable housing developers, property managers, and resident services staff that are committed to boosting voter turnout in their properties. I encourage you to stop by the Advocacy Center throughout the day to learn more and get signed up for all these opportunities. And we have a brand new voter engagement hub called TurboVote, which is a one-stop shop where you can register to vote, sign up for election reminders, find election information customized to your community, and check your voter registration status. You can scan the QR code or visit ourhomes.turbovote.org or stop in the Advocacy Center if you would like assistance or to learn more about this tool. Today's plenary is an opportunity to hear from 3 housing justice leaders that are bringing nonpartisan voter engagement to the forefront of their communities. Our panel will feature Dr. Bambi Hayes-Brown, President and CEO of Georgia ACT and member of the NLIHC Board of Directors, Lauren Legutsky, Director of Community Impact at POA Communities, and Mary McGovern, President of the Minneapolis High Rise Representative Council. It's really an honor to share the stage with all of you. I know, speaking personally, that I've learned so much from all of the work that you are doing, and the Our Homes, Our Votes campaign has really benefited from the wisdom of all of your example. So I'm thrilled to be able to share the stage with them. We'll open it up. We'll have brief presentations from each of our speakers sharing about some of the work that they're doing. I'll then ask a few questions, and we will open it up for audience questions. So please submit those questions on the Engage Fully app throughout the session, or visit our staff in the back of the room. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Dr. Bambi.
Good morning, everyone. All right, so it's indeed an honor and a pleasure to be here today to talk about the voter engagement work in the great state of Georgia. You know, Georgia used to not be known as a quote unquote battleground state. Oh, but we turned the tide in 2020. So every state is a battleground state. Media, they're present. Okay, all right. I don't have a long time, but we're gonna have a good time here. So I'm just gonna talk very, very briefly about exercising your voice for effective voter engagement and housing, and some of the work that we do. Again, I'm Dr. Bambi Hayes-Brown with Georgia Advancing Communities Together, and also on the board of the National Low Income Housing Coalition. I'm also a former public housing resident and a person with lived experience housing insecurity. So you may see me with a little boy that's with me all the time, every time I travel. He was actually born into homelessness. So homelessness doesn't have a look. I had a bachelor's degree and was 4 classes away from my master's degree when I experienced homelessness. So that's one of the things that I always like to present to people. It doesn't have a quote unquote look. So Georgia Act, when I first started at Georgia Act, I got engaged with voter activities, doing voter registration in our MARTA or transit stations with the New Georgia Project under the leadership of Stacey Abrams. I'm sure everybody knows her. So it was her organization that really trained me and really got me engaged in voter engagement. But it really goes back further than that. I was raised by my maternal grandparents, and they were born in 1916 and 1922, respectively. So voting was very different for them coming up. And I remember as a very, very young child that they would take my older sister and I into the polls. That was back when they had the curtains and you had to press the lever. Some of y'all may not remember that. But that was something that was very impressionable upon me. And so we decided to make that as a pillar at Georgia Act. And so what we did was back in 2020, when we had the runoff that nobody was expecting, we had about 2 weeks to cover 66 Georgia counties. So we were specifically focusing on those rural counties because we knew everybody was going to Atlanta, which is Fulton, DeKalb, Clayton, all those big counties. So we really wanted to target in on especially the Black vote in those rural counties. And so because of the success for that, we partnered with Fresh Communities, Reverend Malone, in his absence, and our partners at Georgia Act. We went to 42 counties in southern Georgia and 5 counties in middle Georgia. And that was for our Votes, Vaccines, and Visions tour, where we talked about, because back then in 2001, the vaccine was just coming out and people were just really wanted to come out and do more things. And we had our votes where we were registering people to vote. But the vision part was where we were actually holding town hall meetings in communities. And we reached over 8,000 individuals. And then our social media reach, as well as we had a rap bus, was over 10,000 people that were reached. And so in those communities, we did something different. We didn't wait for people or have people to come to us. We went to the people, which means we had to have that bus. We partnered with the Fort Valley State University that had a mobile technology trailer that was complete with Wi-Fi as well as computers for people to actually go in and register. We also had a gaming trailer. So we had food. We had all of these things that would get people out, and we went physically out into the communities in parking lots, at grocery stores, just outside of public housing units. They wouldn't let us park the bus in the public housing units, but that's okay. Because if they had a park, that's where we were. And so that was very, very successful in thinking outside of the box than just your traditional voter engagement. We also partnered with nonprofit Vote, with 5 statewide partners, Black Voters Matter, with the Block is Hot tour, and especially talking about those things with Senate Bill 202, which changed the way that we did our voter engagement and mobilization. So we could no longer hand out snacks and water to people, and all that stuff. But that's okay. We got creative because we parked that bus 150 feet outside of the polling precinct, and we was handing out all kind of stuff. So nonpartisan, of course, because I know this is being recorded. So here you have some pictures where we went to Dawson, Georgia, home of Otis Redding. And you see the people that are on the Fort Valley State University mobile trailer. That's where we did a lot of our town hall meetings talking about housing issues, and housing came up over and over and over and over again. Urban, rural, suburban, it didn't matter where. Everybody talked about housing. So you see we have the food, we have all these things that are there in Dawson. And then we took the show on the road to Fitzgerald, Georgia. And they have a community center there. Again, very small town, so we actually went to the community center there. And we also had similar things such as food and other information that will help bring people out. And then this was The Block is Hot tour in Savannah. It was hot. It was so hot that day, like literally. But as you see, there were record numbers of people that were coming out to get registered to vote and to talk about those issues that are important to them, including housing. And Diane, I'm sorry, we kind of snuck away last year. We got invited by Senator Ossoff to come and speak with him. So we tipped away during the policy forum last year. You know, hey, when the senator calls, I'm going. But I did come back, didn't I? Okay. And so we got a chance to meet personally with Senator John Ossoff and talk about those voter issues, those community development issues, those economic development issues, and also any and everything about housing. So they made a mistake and gave me the platform to talk to him. And I felt like I dominated the conversation. But housing is a human right. And without housing, you have nothing else. So housing intersects with so many other things, but housing is the foundation. And there's our contact information. We do have Xinwen Zhang, who is here in the audience with us, our policy person. And so thank you, and I'll turn it over to my colleagues.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lauren Legutsky. I'm with Preservation of Affordable Housing, or POA, and I'm just here to talk to you a little bit about some of our voter engagement strategies. Let me see if I can. Okay, great. So who is POA? So we're a nonprofit housing provider, affordable housing provider. We own and manage about 12,000 apartments that are home to almost 20,000 people. And so I want to talk a little bit about why voter engagement is so important to us as an organization. You can see our mission here up on the screen and some of the data that Courtney reviewed, the disparities between homeowners and renters and lower income folks and higher income folks. So we see that data and we know that we have a role to play as a houser to help as much as we can remove the barriers that residents are facing in accessing the platform of voting. We know that that's key to our mission. So we're in 11 states in DC, and as we all know, depending on the state that you live in, your voter resources might look a little bit different. So we have to keep that in mind as we support the staff on the ground who are supporting residents around voter engagement. A little bit about our staff. So we have property managers, resident service coordinators, and maintenance staff who are all, they know the residents that they're serving in these communities, and they are really ambassadors for voter engagement. Politics is not something that's easy to talk about, and also, affordable housing can be a very compliance-driven industry, so our staff are typically very overworked. There's a lot on their plate. There are a lot of different balls that they're being asked to keep in the air at one time. So as far as our voting strategy goes, or voter engagement strategy goes, we're always thinking about how to make it as easy as possible for the staff, as plug and play as possible, so that it's just not another thing that they have to, on top of rental assistance, on top of benefits maximization for residents, that we can make this really accessible to our staff to engage residents about. I'm going to talk a little bit about registration, education, and how to get folks out to the polls on election day and what we're doing. So for voter registration, we really focus our role as a houser on existing touch points with residents. For example, when folks move into one of our properties, their address just changed. So that's a great opportunity to just say, hey, can we help you update your voter registration now that your address has changed? And then when you turn 18, your status on the lease changes a little bit, so our staff are reaching out to people anyway. And so it's saying, hey, happy birthday. We have some paperwork that we need you to complete, and also, do you want some help registering to vote? We also use other engagement touch points, but again, in keeping with trying to make this as accessible for our staff, we try to use existing touch points for these strategies. And then another important thing that we've learned is just the timing of, especially around voter registration, where you can register anytime during the year before a deadline, and people live full, busy lives, and it just might not feel like a priority to them all the time. So we try to time our engagement around registration specifically with a natural momentum around a deadline or an upcoming election, and we get a lot more interest and engagement from folks if we do that. This is just an example of one way that we try to make this work a little bit easier for our staff. So we put together these voter registration kits that we'll ship out to each property management team. And it's branded material that makes it really easy for that team to kind of unpack it and create really engaging touch points for residents, like a voter registration station or to decorate their voter registration drive. I don't know if you can see the text all that well, but there's a ballot drop box. We provide the voter registration forms for that particular state. We'll have pre-addressed envelopes if people want to mail in their registration form, and just trying to make it, again, as easy as possible. On voter education, two main strategies. One is really just laying out the landscape of the calendar year, so calendaring out all of the different deadlines, whether that's a voter registration deadline, mail-in ballot deadline, the actual election. And then we want to support residents to go confidently to the polls. We want them to know exactly what to expect when they get there, what's going to be asked of them, and of course the content on the ballot. That's where the nonpartisan piece really comes in for us. So we're housers, we're not necessarily experts on political engagement or how to educate folks on different local ballot initiatives, and we lean on local partners for that. The League of Women Voter chapters have been great, and then a lot of the more locally driven organizations have been helpful. And then finally, voter mobilization. So in the days leading up to an election, we just want to keep it top of mind for residents. Again, they're busy, they're working, they've got a million things going on. So our staff, they'll call them or send email blasts and just ask, hey, do you have a voting plan? Do you know where your polling location is? Make sure you have a plan to go vote. We provide scripts to staff too. They don't have to use them, but it can kind of, for anyone that's maybe an introvert or doesn't feel comfortable talking about something that they view as political to residents, they can follow that script or kind of make it their own. And it just that's one less barrier for our staff who are doing a lot already. And then on election day, we're thinking about how do we remove barriers for folks getting to the polls. So is that transportation? If it's really close, should we organize a walking group? Trying to make it fun and sort of a community activity, the act of going to vote. We can also celebrate voting by having an event for anyone, but especially those who voted, to come and kind of celebrate, what they did that day. The last thing I'll say is just how important resident input and leadership is in this work. And that has to start by asking residents for input and offering them a role to play in all of this. So that's exactly what we do. They are stakeholders in the community. They know their neighbors best. So we always ask them, hey, do you want to work with us on this? Are you really passionate about this? We love your ideas. And then focusing on trying to empower our staff to support residents or empower residents around this. Again, a lot of people see this as talking about politics. So we try to just acknowledge that that's real and just some basic strategies for how to navigate those conversations. And we do that by trying to focus locally whenever we can. This is just an example of one of the questions that we'll ask residents around voting, and it helps us understand some of the barriers that they see themselves for why they might not be planning to vote this year, so that we can give that to our staff, and staff can kind of be prepared to have talking points and conversations related to that. So it's just important to ask and offer and engage residents in this work. And I think that's it from BOA. Thanks, everyone.
Good morning. I'm Mary McGovern. I'm the president of the Minneapolis High Rise Representative Council, and I'm proud to be from Minneapolis, Minnesota. We have the right to vote. We have the right to have fair housing, good housing, not to have the roof fall over our head, to have cold and hot water, to have the windows so the cold air doesn't blow in. We have that right. And let's hear it. Right for fair housing. That's what we need, every one of us. Okay, we're going to get to, there is one thing here. It says, residents don't vote, so it's easy for us to ignore them. That's from elected officials. You know what I have to say about that? You don't want to hear the words I have to say about that. No, you don't. But we have 42 high rises in Minneapolis, and we have some strong voices there. They don't let the elected officials get away with anything. I have butted heads with our mayor more than a few times. And I say, hey, what's fair for you has got to be fair for us and more so. So get after your officials. That's what voting is all about. The MHRC represents over 5,000 residents living in 42 high-rises. Our nonpartisan voter registration ensure the residents are seen and heard by elected officials. Ensure that residents know and see that their voices do matter. Bring about changes residents want to see in their housing and in their neighborhoods. Voter registration. Training for residents on how to talk to residents about the importance of voting and helping them register. Door knocking to register voters. Registering voters at community events. Tabling at building lobbies, recruiting other nonprofit partners, voting registration contest among high-rise. That's fun. That is fun. Voter education, precinct caucus primary election information, candidate forums for mayoral and city council elections. I love that part. Get a bunch of elected officials at your table and just drill them like you would not believe it. We have fun with that. Oh my gosh. Publish candidate statements in our monthly newsletter. Sample ballot training. Ex-felon voting rights. Absentee voting information. Recruit bilingual election judges. Get out the vote activities. Promote early voting. Polling place flyers sent to all buildings for posting. Door knocking on election day. I love door knocking. When somebody doesn't answer the door, I keep knocking and knocking and knocking until they answer the door. Special voter edition newsletter. Volunteers providing rides to polls. And that's a good one because we have, in our 42 high rises, we have a lot of senior citizens and they need the help and we will help them. Voter engagement plans for 2024, promote attendance at precinct caucuses, voting in primary elections, polling, I already did that one, I'm sorry. Which activities are effective and why? One-on-one conversations about importance of voting help residents think about their personal reasons for voting. Promoting voter engagement activities through monthly newsletter. The High Rise Lowdown reaches over 5,000 apartments every month. You'll see my picture in there almost every month. Good Lord. Pre-election day activities like posting polling locations, and election day activities like rides to the polls and providing coffee, donuts on election day help to generate excitement about voting. So that is, in a nutshell, that's what we do in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our incredible panelists. What an amazing body of work you have all been doing over the past few years and have underway for the 2024 election cycle. To kick us off with a question, I know we have a lot of people in this room that are feeling really inspired and perhaps ready to embark on a nonpartisan voter engagement campaign of their own. What is one piece of advice that you would each give to an organization or individual that is looking to get into nonpartisan election work for the first time in 2024?
One of the things that I would say is definitely don't be afraid. This is something that is vital and extremely important to us. If you're scared, stay home. Because it's serious. I know we joke about it, but when we were doing our voter engagement work in 2020, we had a caravan that was going through rural southeast Georgia. And the people who were supposed to be there to protect us, i.e. law enforcement, let people come in. Someone mooned our caravan. We were threatened. We had to hide our bus. Someone put sugar in my gas tank. All of those things. So Reverend Malone is a pastor, and so he prayed for peace to be still. But after learning that, we had to get our piece of steel to take with us. And thankfully, we didn't have any more incidences. But also learn the language of people. A lot of times, being from rural Georgia, we would say, you know, our ancestors died for people to vote. But a lot of young people, they just can't relate to that. So you really have to make sure that your messaging is clear and relates to what is important to them, especially our young people. And then also use your partners. Even doing all this work, we couldn't do this work with a two-person staff, which is what we had at the time. So we really relied on the faith-based institutions to provide vans and buses to take people to the polls, and also funeral homes, because they have limousines. So we had to tell people, look, it's not your last ride. It's not final destination. We're trying to get you there to the polls. So, you know, someone's doing this for the first time. No fear, partnerships, and be creative, and know your audience, and craft your message.
Fantastic.
I can offer, if you're an organization that's going to be launching like a voter engagement campaign, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but as much legwork as you can do for the staff on the ground who are going to be engaging directly with folks, put that time and effort in on the front end so that the people on the ground can focus on the trust building and be present in those conversations, because they can be tough conversations. It's hard to, you know, separate voting from politics, and so those conversations are real, and a lot of the disengagement people feel is for good reason. So as much of the legwork you can put in to just take, you know, just the information gathering, the materials gathering off, you know, off the capacity of the staff so that they can focus on that people-to-people work. It's so important. So that's what I would say.
Know your candidates. Study them inside and out. You don't want some rinky-dink coming in there and you voted them in and say, oh my gosh, what did we vote in? Oh my gosh, don't do that. Another part in it, we have a lot of immigrants that have moved in, and we need to teach these people how to vote, where to vote, what their feelings are. They don't know anything about what's going on here in the United States, so this is a learning process for both of us. I have learned a lot from them, and hopefully they have learned a lot from us.
Thank you. Yeah, I think civic engagement, bringing in new voters and having that voter education piece is so critical. So thank you, everyone. Another question. So I know that many potential voters are often skeptical that voting is worth their time, especially because elected officials might not always keep their promises to make positive change, and people might feel a little bit disengaged from the process. What messaging is effective to overcome voter skepticism and encourage them to participate in the democratic process?
I always tell people, if you don't vote, you are voting. You're voting against your best interest. So it is important to vote. And if a candidate is not doing what you like for them to do, run for office. That's one of the things that we are encouraging more people to run for office, especially renters, those with lived experience. And Congressman Frost from Florida, whew, I was about to say, yes, we can. Some of y'all may get that, some of y'all may not. But, you know, that's something that we really have to hold our elected officials accountable, because some of you may not be familiar with the 45 record. But I always say voting is the A part. When you flip the record over, the B part is holding them accountable. And so you have to do this voter engagement and engagement with your elected officials 365. There is no off years in voting. So you need to vote in every election, because there are referendums, there are judges that are being run unopposed a lot. We see that quite a bit as well. So just really getting the message out that if you don't vote, then you are voting against those things that would help benefit you, those things that are important to you. And if someone isn't doing right, hey, get out there and run for office. And also attend those meetings, as my colleague was saying. Have your elected officials come to meetings and give them what we call do better medicine, because a lot of them can do a whole lot better than what they're doing.
There's not a whole lot to add to that, but I'll just say, you know, don't shy away from that, how folks are feeling about that, or try to talk over it. I think holding space for it, listening to what they have to say, what their lived experience has been that's contributing to that disengagement is important, and seeking to understand, because in trying to understand, you might be able to find a narrative that really resonates with them for why they should vote.
What I tell elected officials that are coming up to vote is walk in my shoes. I've been homeless, and I'll say to them, have you ever been homeless? Do you know what it feels like? I want you to support me 100%. I want you to support my residents 100% for fair housing, for everything. You know, I want my residents to feel safe and secure. I don't want to have to worry about them going outside the door and getting shot. You know, I want you elected officials to stand behind me 100% or even more. That's why I'm going to vote for you. And if you don't, forget it.
Thank you. We have a few questions that have come in from the audience. I'll start with one, I think, geared towards Lauren. How can we get more landlords to support voter engagement, and how can nonprofit landlords recruit their colleagues?
Oh, that's a great question. I think going back to the whole affordable housing is a very compliance-driven industry. I think there's some fear around how to, especially if you're a nonprofit, how to stay nonpartisan. But I think the work that the NLIHC is doing through Our Homes, Our Votes is really dispelling a lot of the common myths related to how to do this work and how to do it within, the guidelines that exist. And HUD actually really encourages voter engagement work among housers. So I think getting that messaging out there, that's why POA is on the Housing Providers Council, so that we can learn from other housers doing this work and also promote it in different forums and audiences we find ourselves in. So I think just trying to keep dispelling those myths that voting is voting is politics, but the idea that then housers can't touch it. I think we're getting there, and I think the work that the NLIHC is doing is helping to clear some of that up and demystify it.
Thank you. I appreciate the plug as well. If you're interested in learning more about the Housing Providers Council, we have a handout in the Advocacy Center. And as Lauren mentioned, HUD really does not only allow but actively encourage nonpartisan voter registration and mobilization activities for HUD-subsidized providers. They've sent out announcements about this to HUD providers, so definitely encourage you to look into that information. It's on our website if you're wondering what are some of those do's and don'ts. So someone asked a question about why people don't vote. They noted that there were 80 million eligible voters, 33% of whom didn't vote in 2020. What are the top drivers of why people don't vote? So based on your own experiences in your communities, when someone says they're not voting, what is their typical reason, and how do you have a conversation with them?
One of the biggest reasons is that they don't think elected officials that are going to get voted are going to listen to what we have, what our problems are. That's the biggest thing. And that's, that's why I go door knocking. That's why I have coffee hours. That's why I do a lot of stuff that I do, because these officials, I make sure I go talk to these officials myself. I don't let them get away with anything. I said, hey, my residents don't want to vote for you because they don't think you're going to do this. Are you going to do it or aren't you going to do it? And if you're not going to do it, I'm walking out that door, plain and simple, So you have to tell your residents or your tenants or whatever, if you don't vote, nothing's going to happen, plain and simple.
Ditto.
Love it. We like to highlight examples of really close elections, especially at the local level. Elections can be won by dozens of votes. So there's really often cases where that one vote always makes a difference. You never know when your vote is going to be the difference between the outcome of an election. Great. So we got a question related to engaging young voters. Illinois, as well as other states, allow for 17-year-olds to vote in primary elections if they will be 18 by the time of the general election. Are any of your groups doing work to engage young voters? And I know, Lauren, you talked about the calls to 18-year-olds. Maybe you can kick us off with that one.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, that touch point of reaching out to kids that are turning into adults at their 18th birthday, that has been effective for us. And then for younger children, I know, they might not be participating in elections yet, but it can actually be a really great way to sow the seeds for the future and also to engage the parents. So if parents see that their kids are, getting passionate and excited about like a mock election that we host in our community room, then that might just, get them to engage with us a little bit about making their own voting plan. That goes for youth engagement across the board, whether it's related to voting or not. That kind of family engagement is really important. You're not just engaging the youth, but their parents as well. So that's sort of, we definitely think about engaging the younger kids, even if they might not be voting for several years.
Yes, and at Georgia Act, last year we started our youth policy initiative that started out really small and exploded this year. So we just had our annual housing day at the Capitol, and we had numerous high schools throughout the state of Georgia, Dougherty County High School, Etowah High School, Lambert High School, and we also had students from Emory Law School, Georgia State, the Atlanta University Center, and various HBCUs. And we use the tools, thank you, Courtney, and the QR codes to get them engaged. So we did an entire session with them, and we had over 100 youth that were that attended. And so they were very, very engaged because young people, they could go home and talk to their parents and talk to their guardians. We've also worked with our various NAACP branches throughout the state that also, many of them also have housing committees. So there is another untapped resource that a lot of people can look into in their communities. And these groups would actually partner with Georgia Act, and we would go into the high schools. So it's important to partner with your local school principals who will let you go into the high schools and allow you to register those students. And then finally, I'll say that we also went into the jailhouses because everybody that's locked up ain't guilty. We all know that. I hope we do. Or they have not, their cases have not been adjudicated. So in working with some of the local sheriffs in various counties, we were actually able to go into some of those youth centers, youth detention centers, and also jailhouses to register people to vote, and a lot of those were our young people.
Thank you. We have just about 2 minutes remaining. I'll ask one final question. A few years ago, we rarely saw candidates ask about affordable housing or talk about affordable housing in their campaigns, and now we see it really elevated as a top priority issue among campaigns at the local, state, and federal level. How is your work encouraging candidates to prioritize housing justice or raise the profile of housing as an election issue in your community? I know, Mary, you mentioned the candidate forums. Maybe if you want to take this one.
Like I said again, our residents have loud voices, and they are going to tell who's ever up for voting for this year that we need affordable housing. I'm low-income housing. We have the 42 high-rises in Minneapolis, and they are in desperate need of repair every year, which costs so much money. We need funding like you would not believe it, and we let these elected officials know that. We need funding, because as we know, the federal government only gives us so much money. So we have to come up with more money from someplace else, under a rock someplace, who knows, We just need that funding. We need our residents secure and safe. We need police department roaming our high rises. We need security guards in our buildings. So, we need everything. So we are after our elected officials every day. This is not a once out of the year job or every 2 years or every 4 years. This is a 24/7 job. And we need to do this. And we tell everybody in our high rises, which they know they work around the clock. And I'm so proud of our residents. I really am.
Thank you. I think that is a perfect note to wrap us up. Again, this is a major election year, but there is no off year for elections. These incredible leaders are doing this work day in, day out, in even-numbered years and odd-numbered years, and I'm so honored to have them here, and I hope you are all feeling inspired to do the same. Thank you.